Okay, the recording has started. And after I complete a, it's just a slide deck of information. After we go through that, we'll have plenty of time for some question and answer and just really engage in some of these concepts. All righty. So if I could get somebody to confirm real quick one more time that you are seeing my slide deck, that would be great.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, information literacy and AI. And specifically, we're looking at articulation and identification. So articulation of these concepts that revolve around information literacy, and then identification, identifying when we have mastered, it's probably a fair word, mastered information literacy skills, and then also we can begin to recognize how AI may fit into the conversation. Learning the framework. And again, this is the information literacy framework established by ACRL. Information literacy is a set of 6 different integrated abilities encompassing the reflective discovery. So that's 1, discovery of information, the understanding of how, number 2, how information is produced, number 3, how it's valued, number 4, the use of information, number 5, creating new knowledge, and number 6, participating ethically in communities of learning. So 6 different concepts that we're going to discuss today. The 6 different concepts, they are considered core concepts, but there is no hierarchy. Each one of these 6 concepts are meant to be learned all together. Layered over time, you eventually begin to recognize that some of these skills that are spelled out in these 6 concepts, you really do begin to understand that that's what you're becoming as a master's or a doctoral level student. I will say though, the framework is extremely wordy. It is written on a really academic level. What I mean by that is that it's really hard to remember what each of the 6 frames are. I find their titles to be forgettable, unfortunately. But I do want you to hear what they are. The first is authority is constructed and contextual. Number 2, information creation as a process. Number 3, scholarship as conversation. Number 4, searching as strategic exploration. Number 5, research as inquiry. And number 6, information has value. So these are the 6 core concepts. But again, these headings, titles, they're difficult to remember. And so years ago, I took a look at the framework and I rewrote it. Not completely, but just I rewrote the headings so that I could remember what each one of them is really trying to accomplish. And I feel like the rewriting of these makes it more practical for a student to kind of double check yourself. You can ask if you are actually learning how to be information literate on a holistic level. And I simply changed the titles using the question words that we all know: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And each one of those words correlates with one of the frames. So for instance, the very first one, authority is constructed and contextual. That really answers the question, who? Because it allows us to say, who are the authorities within my field? It addresses how much effort am I putting into recognizing that there are people that have gone before me that know an awful lot about my particular subject area? And am I spending enough time in the literature to recognize who these authorities are? Am I beginning to see their names and understanding the theories perhaps that are associated with them, or just the work that they've done over time? So more specifically, when we talk about authority as constructed and contextual, we understand that experts understand that authority is a type of influence that's recognized or exerted within a community or a field of study. Experts view authority with an attitude of informed skepticism, but also with an openness to new perspectives, additional voice, and changes in schools of thought. So again, that first frame we're looking at. If I could just ask everybody to make sure that you are muted. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Thank you. So again, if they say who has created information? Are they a good fit for your project? Do they have the authority to speak to your questions? And how do you know this? Are you grasping the understanding of authority? And are your reference pages, the work that you're doing, does that reflect an engagement in the writings of the best in your field? The next one we're looking at is what, and that refers to information creation as a process. Basically, what we're saying when we say what is what kind of information best fits your project. The information creation process could result in a range of information formats and modes of delivery. So experts, meaning students and researchers, faculty members, experts look beyond format when they are selecting resources to use. Information comes in many, many, many different formats. So what type of information best suits your project? It may be newspapers that are going to hold the most up-to-date information. It could be a journal. It could be a peer-reviewed journal. It could be textbooks. It could be interviews. I've said it before. It could be a blog. The point is that are you limiting your research in such a way that it's missing the best kind of information for your project? And do you understand the vocabulary that's associated with certain requirements? Some of you may be in fields where peer-reviewed journal articles within the last 5 years, for instance, are really the best source of information. It could be that there's a certain type of research that's necessary for your particular program. When we talk about what, it's recognizing what kind of information is appropriate for my project. The third is when. So we discussed who, we discovered what, now when. When refers to scholarship as conversation. When have you done enough research and digging in and writing and thinking and exploring that you can take part of the conversation? When refers to the idea that conversations, they take place on multiple levels. And there is going to be a point in time when you begin to realize that you are becoming an authority in your field and that you do have something important to add to the conversation. You're getting a degree, you're creating a dissertation, you're creating a thesis, something that is going to add to the information, the authority within this field of study. It's also recognizing, though, that getting into the conversation can be a bit of a journey itself, learning how to get into that conversation and recognizing that there are powers and authority structures that influence our ability to participate in that conversation. So when do academic conversations happen? When have you done enough exploring and reading of another's ideas to join the conversation with thoughts that are share-worthy? And do you know how to actually get into that conversation? Are you being introduced to bridges from the class to the professional world? Are you reading and reading and reading and reading before formulating a narrow focus, or feeding unsubstantiated opinions? Do you recognize professional humility, and are you learning to express it yourself? Where, searching as strategic exploration, where answers the question, where do I want my research to land? The act of searching often begins with a question that directs the act of finding needed information. Encompassing inquiry, discovery, serendipity, searching identifies both possible relevant sources as well as the means to access those sources. Simply put, there is a plethora of information out there. And most of us come into a new program with a wide range of interests and passions. And we do need to recognize that we can't necessarily write about it all, and that we do need to identify where we want our research to eventually land. So what are those research methods? Are you beginning to understand them? Do you approach projects with predetermined questions, or are you considering, exploring, and discovering first? Do you welcome cross-disciplinary research, or are you kind of falling into a trap of looking at one database because you know that one database really well? Or are you willing to branch out and to recognize that other disciplines may have something authoritative to say about your particular topic? Oh, this is a long one. Sorry. I'll give you a second to read this. All right. Why? Research as inquiry. Experts recognize the collaborative effort within a discipline to extend the knowledge in that field. Many times, this process includes points of disagreement, where debate and dialogue work to deepen the conversations around knowledge. When we talk about why, we're talking primarily about biases. Why do you like one researcher better than another? Why do you feel like your thought processes regarding a certain subject area, why those thought processes are correct, and that why does it feel uncomfortable when somebody challenges them? You know, recognizing that we all have biases, and sometimes that's great, and sometimes they do need to be revisited. It's a good point to ask yourself, you know, why are you even interested in the topic that you're exploring? Are you curious? Why are you leaning one way or another? Why do we develop biases in the first place? You know, sometimes it's a matter of looking back a little bit and recognizing that the things that we've learned, maybe they weren't completely a complete story. Maybe we need to learn some foundational information before we can move forward. Are you aware the dangers of proof texting? Are you reading only those people that you agree with? Or are you willing to read the opinions of others that you don't necessarily agree with? And do you recognize that research, it is not a straight line. It never is a straight line. You can't project out that this is where you're going to land, you know, that you're going to get halfway there and realize that you need to make a U-turn, go back and revisit something, and then get back on the road again. And it's a complete process of sometimes stopping, sometimes just hitting a pause to really consider what you're learning, and then recognizing if you need to maybe add a little bit more to your knowledge that you didn't have. And then the very last one of the information literacy framework is answers the question, how? We talk about information having value. As creators and users of information, experts understand their rights and responsibilities when participating in a community of scholarship. Experts understand that value can be wielded by powerful interests in ways that marginalize certain voices. Could I ask mute, please? Thank you. So when we say how, it's answering the question, how are you showing consideration and appreciation for those who have gone before you? How are you citing? And are you citing, for that matter? And are you recognizing that sometimes some voices are being missed? Can you cite a paper properly? Do you understand real life consequences of plagiarism or intellectual piracy? Can you differentiate between common knowledge and that which must be cited? Recognizing that the more you become familiar with your field of study, the more you're at risk for plagiarizing. And do you see evidence of inequity within the world of publishing? It exists. Being being published, it is a privileged place to be. And not always are the best voices represented within our traditional publishing systems. All right. Very recently, we had to add a new place at the table for AI. And in an academic setting, I keep referring to AI as being a moving target because it is. The reality is that we're all learning to interact with new tools, and we're asking ourselves questions, of whether we should be using these tools. What are their benefits? What are the detriments of using AI, if there are any? And then communicating to our students what is expected or acceptable. It really did come and shake up our world. And so what I would recommend is that when we think about information literacy, artificial intelligence really is a seventh component that could be added to this framework, if nothing else, on your own level. If you're recognizing that you're learning the who, what, when, where, why, and hows of information literacy, making room for that extra question of whose. And when I say whose, I mean whose voice are you developing? Artificial intelligence has the ability to create entire dialogues for us. We can ask it to tell us what we think. If we really want to go that route, we can do that. But the risk is developing a voice that's not ours. It's not true to who we are. So when I add the seventh frame of whose, I'm talking about voice is developed and it is articulate. Information literate students will have discovered and honed their professional voice because of exposure to and study of seminal and up-and-coming sources of information in their field. Students gain both functional as well as rich contextual understanding. Students grow this knowledge, gaining insight into the nuanced components, and they dare to dissect, experiment, reorganize, and create something unique. Students gain agency and forward along new insights within their fields of study. So we ask ourselves, whose voice is being developed? Is there ownership over the research? Is this voice human, and is it articulate? Could you produce evidence? In a person-to-person conversation, could you create evidence that you have ownership over this topic? Are you growing your professional voice? Are you looking for opportunities to discuss and to reflect? And can you provide evidence of interaction and assimilation of research and development of your own unique thoughts? When we allow AI to replace our voice, we are essentially abandoning the responsibility and the privilege of what gaining an education really means. So a new look at the framework would be using the standard 6, who, what, when, why, and how, but then adding in the component of whose voice am I developing in a world of AI. Just to let you know, we do have another upcoming workshop early February. This slide deck will be made available to you, so don't feel like you have to write all this down right now. And I'm going to stop sharing. And get back to your lovely faces and open it for questions. And I also want to thank you. You all were my guinea pigs today. This is a new workshop, and it was important enough to me to make sure that our doctoral and master's level students begin to have definitions and better understanding of what we mean by saying we expect information literate students. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and let y'all unmute and ask any questions you have.
Hi, Meredith. Thank you for all of that. That was very helpful. Question I have is, now I'm not particularly inclined towards using AI really for anything, but I wonder, are students encouraged to use it in any particular ways to help out with research that doesn't threaten the legitimacy of their work or the development of their voice?
And it's a very good question, and I appreciate the question. Let me backtrack just for a moment. I'm part of the AI task force here on campus, and I'm very thankful to be part of that because it's given me some insight into the different perspectives of our faculty. And it needs to go without saying, but unfortunately, this is just not where we are. What needs to be said is that communication with your professors is crucially important when we talk about AI. We definitely have some professors that say, do not touch it with a 10-foot pole or you will be penalized. But then you have other professors that say, no, you will use it. In fact, here are some assignments that we expect you to do where you are bringing AI. We talk about bringing it to the table, that you're bringing it into your conversation, into your research world. And there is that not just expectation, but there is the assignment to go along with the expectation. And there is value on both ends of the perspective. On one end, if you're not using AI, then you are continually developing your research skills. You're going through the hard work of identifying, finding research, and learning how to break it down, to read it quickly, to recognize its value for your project. On the other end, though, there are really good developments. I mean, what we're looking at with, for instance, ChatGPT, we are recognizing that the better we are at prompting it, the better we can get results that are actually helpful. So let's just pretend that you are researching corporations and you're looking for, I don't know, maybe their charitable offerings. I don't know. I'm just kind of making it up. This would be a potential, use for AI, for you to prompt it well, to ask it to look for information regarding your particular topic and to cite it, to provide you citations for where it found that information. Keeping in mind that what it produces, some of it will be fantastic. Some of it will be legitimate locations that you may not have known about, that you can actually begin to analyze these businesses. But then also recognizing that AI has an issue with hallucinations, and so some of the information may be completely false. Very often, probably at least once every couple of days, we will get a request from a student asking for a resource that does not exist. And the reason why they're asking it is because they have used AI for research, and they've been given a citation that's just not real. And so we do have the conversations of, yes, AI can be amazing, and they're doing exactly right. They are asking authorities in the field, does this actually exist? And if it does, can I have it? So unfortunately, I can't give you a very clear yes, no, this is the way to do it, this is not the way to do it. But just going into using any system for research, recognizing that you still have to hold the reins. And you need to make sure that
that's helpful.
Okay with it. Yeah, you're welcome. I don't see everybody on my screen. Unfortunately, I see like a fourth of you. So you don't necessarily have to raise your hand. But with that, in my view, I do see that, Carolyn, you have your hand raised.
So I do have a question. This happened recently to me, actually. We have Discover responses that we're supposed to do, based on other students' writings. Mm-hmm. And I've tried looking up a few of their sources, and they've been dead links or whatever. So I know that they probably used an AI source. And so I just go on and find a different person. But I mean, it just feels to me like that may not be the right response either, because I found it now twice in my trying to write discussion responses where AI sources have been used. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Good job. I think you're doing a great job as far as double checking what you're seeing and not just accepting it. There is the potential of being of handing over our sense of control over the research process by just accepting everything that we see. And so double checking resources absolutely is a wonderful, wonderful first start. I will say though, and this goes back to the original information literacy framework. When we talk about authority figures, I don't want it to be forgotten that the publication process, it is a very privileged world. And sometimes really, really good authoritative information does not land in the places that we expect it to land in. Every once in a while, there will be a true resource that you just cannot find. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's made up. I mean, it could be. It's very, very possible if AI was used. Yes, it could be completely made up. But there are going to be times when you find a resource that you can't seem to locate. I can give you an example. Actually, last week, I was trying to find a dissertation that was used kind of as a basis for somebody else's for a book that a person wrote. The dissertation and the title of the book were just slightly different enough that I could not find it. I could not find the original dissertation. And it took a lot of poking and prodding, and eventually I discovered that it was a dissertation done in a completely different country. And the title, again, was just slightly different enough that had I not figured out which university it was completed in, that I probably wouldn't have found it, and I wouldn't have known that it was legitimate. So every once in a while, if something really does seem legitimate, you don't necessarily need to assume that it's AI generated. If you really are curious, you can ask us. We kind of specialize in finding that needle in the haystack. But do recognize also, I think as you already are realizing that, yeah, sometimes it's not real, but again, sometimes it is.
Yeah, and this was like the link was in the reference, and so then the link was like a different article, completely off topic.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I think I would personally just kind of vow not to do that. Recognize that it's not the best way of doing research, and you can vow to do it differently. Jackie, I see your hand raised. And again, y'all don't need to raise your hand. You can just unmute. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. So I was a little bit late joining, had some technical issues, but anyway, Google Scholar and the number of citations that are for a book or an article on Google Scholar. And the context is ensuring that I'm getting primary sources. So let's say if I see a citation that's been cited 20 times, and another one that has been cited 750 times, is that the difference between a primary source and a secondary source?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Sometimes something was just cited 750 times because it was just very well written, and people found value in it, and they reused it in the sense of borrowing some of the information and then citing it in their own work. Primary source is going to be that original thought, that original writer of information. So when you are on Google Scholar, for instance, and you see how many times something was cited, that can just be a piece of the puzzle that can sometimes help you to recognize how somebody has become an authority in their field. And a lot of times it comes from just being cited over and over and over again. Is that answering your question?
I think so. So, but I'm trying to, if it's possible to do so, to make sure beyond a shadow of any doubt that I'm citing a primary source,
Mm-hmm.
a secondary source.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because sometimes it's hard to discern the difference between it. At least for me, it is.
Okay. Nothing much replaces just deep dives.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if you're reading something that's interesting and they cite something, then that takes it back a level, then you would want to follow that citation. And then it may be that within that citation you realize, no, this is the original. You know, they're not citing anybody else. This is their contribution to the scholarship. But then you might also discover, well, no, it's not. You have to backtrack even more because they're citing somebody else. So it is almost kind of like a historical view of information, how it's developed. But there's really no great shortcut other than just reading the information and catching who they're citing and then going to that source and seeing if they're citing anybody and then going to.
So, like, I have one follow up. So,
Mm-hmm.
if someone does cite a different person, but they put their own spin on what the person said, come up with a new way of looking at issue, a problem, or research, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
would they then be considered the primary source for that new idea?
I think it would depend on how much it's been altered. When we talk about information literacy and we talk about the whole idea of it being a conversation, it's with the recognition that we have a lot of people contributing to the conversation. And there are a lot of original ideas that are poking their way in, but then people play off those original ideas and that sparks another original idea. There is an interconnection that can't be denied, but it's very possible that, you know, somebody inspired somebody else and they went off in a completely different direction because of that. And yeah, that would be an original idea, but that doesn't um, negate the conversation that got to that point in the first place.
Got you. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm taking a quick look in the chat for some questions. Grammarly. Yes, Grammarly is something that is available to you, not the premium version. The university uses Microsoft Editor as our preferred option. I would just suggest being careful with Grammarly. It got a little aggressive in its AI ness. It's just aggressive and very often it's just not right. I think it gives a little bit of insight about how AI works really, really great sometimes, and other times it really just doesn't work very well at all. So as far as it being allowed, I mean, that's kind of a loose question. I mean, it's available to you. You can certainly use it, but you really want to be careful with anything, even Editor. I mean, I've seen some mistakes with Editor as well, but just letting it be a tool, let it help you, but don't necessarily buy everything it says. If you have a question about your writing mechanics, we have the wonderful privilege of having the Center for Student Happiness. We have writing tutors. Please, 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 please take advantage of their expertise. Do we have a way to source AI through Turabian format? Turabian did come up with a way to cite. There is a guide that we have in the library. It's a LibGuide, and it's just called Citation. And in that, we do talk about the different ways to cite information, whether it's Turabian or APA or MLA. I had mentioned before that it's kind of a moving target. So there are best practices. Most of the formatting options, usually it's like best practices is what they're recommending. I think we'll see that firmed up, you know, give it another 6 months or so. And I think we're going to have some real set in stone standards. But you can visit that guide. and you will see some information regarding formatting in all the different ways. Again, I'm recommending the Center for Student Happiness. They really are our experts in citation as well. The library, not as much. It really is the tutors at the Center for Student Happiness that focus on things like citation. Okay.
So, Meredith,
yes.
So, and I hope I didn't jump in front of anyone. Okay. So, the Student for Center Happiness. You know, let's say you have a 40-page document.
Mhm.
Will they review that and offer suggestions, or, you know, is there like a page limit or something that, I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
I would actually just reach out to them and talk to them about your needs. They will be able to speak for themselves a little better than I could, but I know that they will help you review your work. They may not necessarily proof it, but I'm sure that they would walk through the work with you and help you to improve any errors that they're seeing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Nicole, I think you've been unmuted for a while. Nicole, Paige, did you have a question?
Not at this time, but thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Are there any other questions? All right. Well, I am going to let you guys have 17 minutes of your life back. But again, I do want to thank you for participating in this workshop. I know that for some, the concepts of information literacy may be brand new, especially learning the fact that there are 6 very specific frames when we talk about information literacy, that we're talking about something very specific, not something that's just kind of this concept that we all think we know what it means. That there are some definitions that sometimes can be helpful as far as you moving forward and knowing that you are really doing great work becoming the experts in your field. I want to offer any kind of follow-up to these conversations that you may think about and have later on. I'm available for one-on-one research appointments if you're interested. But again, thank you again so much. This is recorded. The recording and the slide deck will be made available to you very briefly. All right.
Thank you.
You are very welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Meredith. Can you hear me?